Hello and welcome to Successful Farming's In the Field, powered by Xtreme Ag.Farm. I'm Bill Spiegel, Crops Editor for Successful Farming and Agriculture.com. 2020 has been a volatile year for corn and soybean growers. Weather, trade, and price have kept all of us on our toes. And now that harvest is well underway, we're learning much more about how to cope with this volatility. In this program, we'll hear from 3 farmers from Xtreme Ag.Farm, a community of top-notch farmers from across the U.S. who provide a mentorship experience to members of that online community. Kelly Garrett, who farms near Arion, Iowa, talks about harvesting corn and soybeans affected by this summer's derecho event in that state. And near East Bend, North Carolina, Kevin Matthews has dealt with 2 hurricane events in 2020. He tells us more about corn and soybean harvest from the Old North State. And wrapping up our farmer interviews is Matt Miles from McGehee, Arkansas. Miles also dealt with severe weather adversity in 2020. Kelly, you were fortunate enough to catch you out in the field today. Where are you at?
I'm about 10 miles west of Denison or 6 miles south of Charter Oak, Iowa, in western Crawford County.
Gotcha. And what are you harvesting today?
Corn.
Okay. Have you had soybean harvest yet?
Yes, soybean harvest we completed a week ago.
Okay. So how has harvest gone for you so far as yields and conditions?
The conditions have been really easy, which is nice because this year hasn't gone very easy. The yields are a bit disappointing. On August 9th, I saw a record crop in the field, or what I thought was the potential for a record crop for us. And on August 10th, we had the derecho. My dad and I farm about 6,200 acres, and every acre that we farm was touched by either hail or wind. I thought we were raising a 75, potentially even 80 bushel bean crop. And they came across, we had about 1,900 acres of beans this year. They went across the scale at 59. So we feel that it took, an easy 10, if not 15 bushel off the beans.
And how about the corn so far?
The corn, I have a high yield plot where my house and my shop are. I live on an 80, and there's about a 60 acre field there that is under the Netafim drip irrigation. And I was trying to set the state record of Francis Childs at 442. I don't know if I would have gotten it or not, obviously, but things looked really good. I had that corn was planted at a population of 50,000. It looked tremendous, and that is the worst hit area I have because of that high population. I knew it was a risk when I planted it, but when you're trying to do something like that, you got to take a shot. It was a variable rate planting wreck. 38,000 in the end rows in the other areas, and then where I know there's about 10 acres there that is pretty good yielding, pretty good dirt, and so that variable rate, that population went up to 50,000, and you can see almost to the plant where that changed because that high population did not withstand the wind. The other corn that we're in, the cornfield I'm in now, I would have expected it on August 9th again. I would have expected 230 bushel corn. It's making about 180 because of the hail. The dry weather had a bit of an effect too, but you get down, we're in the hills here in Crawford County. You get down behind the hill where it's protected, and it goes up to 230, 240, 250. But when you get up on the ridge, it's 120 from the hail and the wind. So the weather played a part.
How do corn and soybean yields compare this year versus long-term average for you?
The beans, lately we feel like we've kind of figured the beans out. And if I don't raise 65 bushel beans now, I'm really disappointed. And I really expect 70. But, when you're going back over my 25-year farming career, a 59 bushel bean yield would be above average. 180 bushel corn, I would say, is a bit below average. We would expect more than that the last 10 or 12 years for sure. Anything under 220 the last 10 years is kind of disappointing.
What new practices did you try for 2020? And given the fact that we've had some environmental conditions, would they have paid off?
The thing that I concentrated on the most was trying to break what I have as my perceived yield ceiling in soybeans. 70, 75 bushel dryland beans and 90 bushel irrigated beans have been a challenge for me to get over. So Lee Lubers does a lot. Lee Lubers doesn't believe in a lot of in-furrow stuff. He believes in a lot of a good base fertility program, which I think we have. And then he likes to have a pretty extensive foliar program. And it's not a lot of money. You're talking $22 an acre, $25 an acre, but it's what products you put on and when you put them on. Timing is very critical. So we had 5 or 6 foliar trials throughout, those 1,900 acres. And we had a 5 to 10 bushel yield response with 3 of them. A couple of them, there was no yield response. And I think a lot of it was because due to that storm, there was added stress to the crop. And that foliar treatment kind of mitigated that stress, relaxed it, Now, the foliar trials I put on the irrigation, they really didn't show anything because the hail beat it up enough that there wasn't an extra yield gain from the irrigation. But in that dry land area, I feel like we learned quite a bit, and I know what I'm going to do next year on my whole crop now. I think I learned a lot.
Next thing is, what have you learned this year in both corn and soybeans that you'll take on to 2021?
I'm going to have a foliar treatment on all my beans. I will spray that foliar treatment and fungicide at R1 and R5. Instead of just having a single treatment at R3, it will be worth the time, effort, and money to go out there twice. That would be on beans. On corn, we variable rate plant everything based on the yield. We call it seeding optimization. And the simple answer to what that is we try to raise a half a pound of grain per stalk, per plant. And I've been kind of in a window where my high yielding areas, I'll plant 32,500. In my low yielding areas, I'll plant 24,000. I'm going to widen that window, and I'm going to go from 20 to 35 because we feel like we're figuring things out. And I'm going to put a few more seeds in those good areas, and I'm going to take a few from those bad areas. I won't spend any more money on seed, but I will put it where it needs to be, and there will be an ROI on that. We save a lot of money. The seeding optimization, when I started doing that, I feel it saves me $15 an acre every year over just blanket rate.
You've got some winter wheat going in, and I assume that's right behind soybeans, correct? How's that working?
Good. We've put it in behind corn before, but that extra stover out there, it's tough to establish a good stand. So we like to put it in behind beans. We'll plant some early beans, get them harvested, realize that basis opportunity with those beans. And then we want to have our winter wheat planted early to establish some good root growth and some good growth in the fall. That's a key to yield the next year.
Very good. Kelly Garrett from Arion, Iowa. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch up with you down the road.
Thank you. It was a great time. I appreciate it.
We're joined here by Kevin Matthews with Matthews Family Farms in East Bend, North Carolina. Kevin, how's harvest progress going for you?
We're about right at a little over half done on corn. Rather be a little further along in that this time of year. Soybeans, we're about a third done, and we just had another hurricane event come through. We got rained out Friday night, and so we're not able to harvest 3 to 4 inches of rain. Finally got some sunlight here just a few hours ago, starting to dry out. We're standing here with some soybeans and corn and river bottoms in the background. We're just ready to get this harvest wrapped up and get our small grain planted and kind of move on.
Kevin, you said this is another hurricane. Just kind of tell me a little bit about the weather conditions so far in 2020.
Yeah, the April and May was very wet, so it was delayed. A lot of the river bottoms were flooded, so we had to replant a lot of replants. We was fortunate with a very small amount of replants. However, hold on. But so we had a small amount of replants to do. A lot of people had a tremendous amount of replants. Fortunately, with the weather forecasting that we pay attention to, we held up 1 week on planting. Very difficult decision to do, but almost every acre of corn that was planted that week was replanted. So I looked pretty smart at the end of the day, but honestly, it was just pure luck. The Lord blessed us not to be planting. So we wrapped up it was about the 10th of June by the time everybody got done planting corn in the river bottoms. That's pretty late for us, but it's fine in river bottoms. You don't have no yield reduction at that stage. Then we got another flood and we had to replant some of that corn. So we actually did a replant the June 27th. Now that's getting late for us. That corn looks like, we went with 105 days, so it's probably going to be 170, 180. I'm very impressed with it for what it's been through to be planted that late. We did fungicide heavy. We fungicide every acre heavy. Then we had we had a little dry spell through June and July. And then the rain started back. We never really got just plumb critically dry. We got maybe about a week or two during some pollination. So there's a few corn varieties that hit that timing with plant dates that our fields and some of our neighbors have seen pollination issues, but that's very few. Coming off 3 bad years here in the Carolinas, this year's been pretty good for us, but you go just east of Raleigh down on the coast in the Blacklands and all, and they're off about 30% this year. It's pretty sad. They really needed the same good year that we've gotten right here. The commodity prices has come back. Attitudes is getting a little better. Stress levels on all of us is getting a little easier, and it's just kind of nice to see some commodity prices where you can be profitable and good yields too.
Kevin, you have both the irrigated and dry land acres. Have you seen any difference in yields between the two?
Our irrigated, we have harvested one farm of corn with corn and one farm of soybeans. The soybeans, we had this 0 solar radiation this time during grain fill on corn and soybeans. We track that very detailed. That's a really important aspect in driving these yields to the next plateau. So we was right around 290, and that's normally we want to be 305, 310 on irrigated corn. So it's off some there. Our soybeans was just, 100 bushel beans are great, don't get me wrong, but that's just what they were. They wasn't no 140s or nothing like that. It was just 98 to 114 is pretty much where they all stayed at. We got a lot of our variety plots done. I was reviewing those results this morning, trying to match them up with our solar radiation and our temperatures and on soybeans. So, a 90 plus bushel soybean is an awesome yield on irrigation, no question about it. But, we've 4 years in a row, we've not been under 100 on the irrigated average. So you don't like coming under. These beans right here is a low population study we're doing, and there's a final population of about 70,000, and it's going to be pretty interesting to see how they cut later this week. But they're definitely in that 100 bushel range. They're very strong looking beans. The corn is just no big yields, but it's really good farm averages. And I will take that over a big NCGA yield anytime. The farm average is where it's at.
Yeah. What is that farm average then?
Dry land on the upland. So we have 2 different environments. We have our upland, which is rolling hills, gets kind of steep at times, red clay land, and then we got our river bottoms, which is really flat, rich, dark land, and it does have some sand ridges in it. The upland, we're running about 165 to 180 right in there, probably end up averaging somewhere around 175. Our bottoms is we just kind of expect them to be in that 190 to 210 range, and we hadn't got into them yet. Normally we let our river bottoms pull our upland up, and then our irrigated also adds. We're looking for a whole farm average in that 180 to 190 range is what we're looking at. And the last 3 years we was 128 due to hurricane damage, and then it was a disaster. Then we was a 140 something, and then a 154 actually. So our APH is usually in that 170 to 180 range. So we've had 3 bad years in a row, and we're really happy to have a average year, and on soybeans it'll be above average.
Kevin, thanks for joining us. Kevin Matthews from East Bend, North Carolina, Matthews Family Farms. Appreciate you giving us a harvest update, and we'll look forward to catching you again down the road.
Yeah, we appreciate it, and Xtreme Ag, we're grateful for all the support that we get. And one thing we always, want to remind everybody is just please be safe out there and take care.
Matt Miles, McGehee, Arkansas. Thanks for joining us today, Matt. I know that you're kind of in the middle of harvest right now. How are things going so far in corn and soybean harvest 2020?
Well, we finished our corn early. We're in the South, so we're kind of nestled in right at the Mississippi River. We're, as a crow flies, probably 10 miles from Mississippi and 25 miles from Louisiana. So we're kind of in that corner. Got our corn harvested, fairly early. I think we were through maybe middle of September with that for the most part. Soybean harvest was a little bit bigger challenge. Of course, if you've been watching the weather any, we've had 3 major hurricanes or tropical storms come through, and we have just been absolutely pounded with bad weather. Fortunately, we made some decisions back in the spring, and I guess I may be jumping ahead, but this spring was one of the wettest springs we had on record. So all of our crops basically got planted in a 10 to 12 day window all at one time. Rice and our corn was about a month late. Soybeans and cotton were basically on time. Peanuts, we tried peanuts this year. They were on time too. But we could see in the spring what was fixing to happen. So, and then we had some different reports that the Gulf was going to be pretty active with tropical storms. So we adjusted some with our machines, did some equipment trading, leased some machines back so that we were prepared for that. As much as you can be prepared for 3 hurricanes, So it's been probably, and I don't want to be, Debbie Downer, but it's probably been the worst harvest that I've ever experienced in my 35 years of farming. Luckily, we had the right equipment. We were able to get a lot of stuff out, in a timely manner. We didn't have a lot of crops that spoiled in the field. What we did have, when Laura come through here, we had 60, 65 mile an hour straight line winds, and we had about 1,500 acres of rice, and about 1,300 of that blew flat on the ground. So it's not like wheat, it's a little harder to get off the ground. It'll sprout down there. Rice is grown in our most of the time our worst soils, so our more mucky. The worse the soil is, the better the rice grows. It's basically the only crop you can grow on some of these poor soils that really shines. So it was tough. I mean, to be honest with you, we got through with our soybean harvest last Tuesday, and ended up taking all of our machines to one of my family members. That's one thing we try to do is if we've got neighbors or family members with crops still in the field, when we get through, we go get them. So that's currently where we are now. We're still in soybean harvest. We harvested ours. Now we're on his. We like about 2,500 acres, having him finished up, and we're also in the cotton. We like 30% of our cotton and probably 60% of our peanuts.
Matt, it's always a good feeling to get the crops out, get your own crops out in the bin. How was corn and soybean harvest this year? What were yields like for you?
Yields on the corn was average, maybe a little better than our average. Somewhere around our average 5-year average. Soybeans was on the high side. We were very blessed with good yields on the soybeans this year. They were really good. The later we got, the worse the yield got. But we ended up with a really nice average when everything was said and done.
So Matt, you've got your corn and soybeans out. Tell me how yields turned out for 2020 for those 2 crops.
The yields were actually surprisingly were good for us. Treated us well. We struggle up here with corn yields because of the heat. We ended up with on 2,200 acres, we ended up with about a 225 bushel yield across the board on the corn. And that's pretty respectable here in our area. And soybeans was one of our better harvests. We had 4,000 acres of soybeans, and they averaged 77. So that's one of our, I'd say that's in the top 5 of some of our highest yields. That many acres to get that kind of yield. So we're pretty excited with that. Plus the markets look better. Other than battling the weather, and the hurricanes, everything else is coming out pretty good.
Yeah, that's good. So Matt, as you you're done with your portion of the 2020 crop. Look ahead to 2021 and tell me what you might do differently for 2021.
Well, one thing, I was kind of forced into planting my corn later this year, simply because of the weather. And my consultant, Rob Dedman, he's a big part of our operation, and he always pushes me to plant it later. Kevin Matthews, same way. He tries to get me to plant it later, and I'm kind of bullheaded towards I need to get it in as early as I can because I'm gonna need these machines to go harvest soybeans. So it opened my eyes to that, which, what I'm thinking about trying is maybe planting my corn a little bit later in more better soil conditions, not get as much cold injury, and actually planting my soybeans earlier. That's something the research has been showing the last few years is that, beans probably should be planted before corn is. And so I'm being open-minded to that. And, we're probably going to try to, be a little bit more efficient with our nitrogen use and our potash use. We've started splitting those potash applications up, our potassium applications up, where it's not all front end loaded. So that's something else in 21 we'll continue to work with because I think we're picking up some yield there. And just that's probably the main things that I can see for next year that I would change.
Good. Well, lots to look forward to in 2021, and Matt, we'll keep abreast of you and the rest of the guys and learn what's going on and look forward to visiting with you down the road. Matt Miles at McGehee, Arkansas. Thanks for joining us today.
Yes, sir, and thanks for having me.
Above average yields given the extreme weather conditions of 2020 in these three areas are indicative of what we've seen throughout the heart of corn and soybean country this year. Let's hear from Al Kluis, managing partner at Kluis Commodity Advisors, as he sifts through the fall harvest reports and shares how an unprecedented grain rally has taken place.
Al, you've had a chance to see what our friends from Xtreme Ag have done for 2020 as far as yields go. I'm just kind of curious, what's happened with all of the grain markets since earlier this year?
Bill, we've got a much different world than what we had in early August. When I look at nearby corn prices, early August, it was at $3.20. Many people forecasting going down below $3. The Dureco hit in Iowa. It turned very dry in western Iowa, and the yield potential of the U.S. went down. And so we put on from $3.20, we hit $4.09 today. So we went up 89 cents a bushel in corn in about 10 weeks. Soybeans, another big turn. We were at about $8.70 on nearby futures the first week of August. Then the dry weather pattern hit, and beans are made in August or they're destroyed in August. And we took a lot off the soybean yield, and we really saw the market advance. And from the low at $8.70, we hit a high of $10.80. So about $2.10 up in the bean market in 10 weeks.
That's a phenomenal movement, Al, that we've seen so far. What are the factors that have turned these grain prices higher?
Well, I mentioned one of them, that is the drop in production. Iowa being a key production state, they had probably 880,000 acres, primarily of corn that's not going to be harvested because of Dureco. The extreme dry conditions really everywhere west of Interstate 35 in Iowa took their yield potential down, and the yield potential went down in southwest Minnesota, Nebraska, South Dakota. So many of the forecasts for 54 and 55 bushel beans turned out to be wrong. And the total planted acreage ended up being less. So you have less crops coming in, number one. Second, China. Man, have they been on a buying spree. I just totaled it up, and I'm assuming that about 60 to 80% of the USDA sales that are marked as being unknown are actually going to end up in China. They have bought, and these are mind-boggling numbers, Bill, about 510 million bushels of corn over the last 3 months. And that's for delivery in this marketing year. Soybeans, they've purchased a record 1.2 billion bushels of soybeans. And so it's just been unrelentless. Day after day, they're buying 3, 4, 6, 8 cargoes of both corn and soybeans. And why are they buying it? They're really short of product over there. This week, nearby corn futures in the Dalian exchange hit a record $9.70 a bushel. And so even when you put our freight onto it, our corn is cheap going into China. Soybeans this week hit $18.50 a bushel on the Dalian. Some of the interior markets over $20. As recently as July, bean futures and Dalian exchange, when you factor in the exchange rate, we're trading at $23.50. So the China buying has really been a big factor. And then to add a little fuel to the fire, we're seeing dry conditions down in South America. So three things: smaller crop in the U.S., huge and very active Chinese buying, and then some potential weather problems developing at both Brazil and Argentina.
Al, you're in the Twin Cities right now. I'm in rural Kansas with corn and soybean harvest going on all around me. What do you advise some farmers to do at this point?
Well, you have to stay disciplined. I mean, it's the news was really bearish in August, and yet it was below people's cost production. If you had crop insurance, it was really frustrating, but you really didn't have any financial risk. We've been selling into the market as it's went up. We had some bean hedges we put on at $9.80. We did some more at $10.30. We did some more at $10.68. So between hedges and puts, we have about half the bean crop covered. On corn, we've also been aggressive there. We've been making sales into the corn market. Our last target was at 408. We have some put options that aren't worth much anymore, but we have a minimum half of the crop sold. Longer term, I'm still optimistic on price, but these are levels we didn't dream of in early August. And for most people with trend line or better yields, we're finally back in a profit zone. And I'm not going to wait till it falls out of the profit zone and then try to panic. So I've done this for over 40 years. And I'm a scale up disciplined sellers. I've got other offers in now up at 11.18 on November beans and at 4.18 on December corn to make another 10% sale. I don't know where the top is, but I do know that if I stay the discipline plan, making sales into the market as it goes up, usually when the trend turns lower, we end up with a good average selling price.
So, Al, gosh. What are you looking for the rest of the year? What should we as farmers, what should you as marketing advisors do between now and the end of the year?
I'm trying to look at, Bill, if we start to see any hint of price rationing. We've went up really fast and really far. Are we going to start seeing any hog liquidation? Are we going to start seeing any ethanol plant shut down? So that's one of the things that I'll be watching for. I probably watch the weather more closely in South America right now than I do in the U.S. The U.S. crop is going in very rapidly. The crop kind of is what it is. And so we're not going to see, I don't think, any big changes from the USDA as we get into the final crop production numbers in January. Really now all the focus is on South America, the weather patterns there. A second would be, is China just going to keep on buying? I mean, they came in after their Golden Week holiday and continued to buy. And this, again, you can watch the news, you can read the internet. This becomes more of a personal decision. What works for the profitability on your farm? And as you get these markets moving higher and you get back into a good profit zone, I do expect a really rapid basis improvement after harvest. So we've rolled some of our hedges from December out into March corn. We've rolled some of our hedges from November out into January beans. Once this crop gets tucked away, we're going to be seeing, I think, a significant basis improvement. Even though the basis is good now, I think we can do better later on. And then finally, Bill, we're really looking also all the way out into 2021. You've got some 980 bean futures out there. Your part of the world, I think you've got some 580 July KC wheat. You're seeing some corn prices get up around $4 in the December 21, December 22. And so when I see these type of rallies develop, I always look at getting the crop we have in the field sold, but also I'm looking out at new crop pricing opportunities.
Fantastic. Al Kluis, he's the managing director of Kluis Marketing Advisors in Minneapolis, Minnesota. You can also read him on agriculture.com and in Successful Farming Magazine. Al, we appreciate your expertise and your guidance today, and we'll look forward to checking in with you down the road.
Okay. Very happy to work with you, Bill. Be safe, and we'll talk to you soon.
We'll be back in November for another edition of Successful Farming's In the Field, powered by xtremeag.farm. Our thanks to the farmers of Xtreme Ag, Matt Miles, Kevin Matthews, and Kelly Garrett, and to Al Kluis of Kluis Marketing Advisory Group for joining us on the program. Be sure to read more from Al and the Xtreme Ag folks in Successful Farming magazine and on agriculture.com.